Are you looking to get your feet wet in Gen AI on your own terms? Check out our free digital course, Build Your Own Custom GPT by Hatchworks. In the course, we teach you step by step how to create your own custom GPT so you can start solving some specific problems and use cases in your business with Gen AI. Trust me, you're going to wow your coworkers and probably even yourself with this new skill. Check out the link in the show notes or visit hatchworks.com to get started. Welcome to Built Right, a podcast by Hatchworks where we help you learn how to build the right digital product the right way. In this season, we're going all in on generative AI, with guests ranging from international AI speakers, founders of Gen AI products, experts in specific domains of Gen AI, and leaders across industries. We're here to help you figure out how to take advantage of this new emerging technology so you can win in the market. So whether you're an AI techie or just AI curious, we got you covered. Let's get into it. Welcome, Built Right listeners. We all know generative AI is causing major disruptions across every industry, but at the end of the day, it's a tool, and everyone can get some amount of value in using a tool. But when you put tools in the hands of very talented domain experts like our guest today, Meg Ball, they do really amazing things. So, for example, if you give me a paintbrush, if you give Picasso a paintbrush, he's going to blow me out of the water anytime we do this because he's an expert at his craft. And that's what we're talking about today with Meg Ball, an amazing graphic designer, art director, and now AI artist who's decided to start leveraging Midjourney to completely transform how she thinks about and approaches creating design. But welcome to the show, Meg.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm excited to be here today with you. Lots to
Yeah.
talk about.
Yeah, and this is going to be a fun one and a bit unique because we're actually going to get into showing off some of the amazing stuff that Meg is doing in Midjourney. So for anybody listening on the audio side, don't worry, we will also have this available on YouTube. So when we get to that portion, you can cut over there and some really cool stuff she's going to be doing. So check the show notes for the link there, or just go to builtright.io and you can find the link. But to kick us off, Meg, I'm curious, so how did you even become aware of generative AI and discover Midjourney? Because, you know, in your role, it's not like you're a technologist to a certain degree. So this is kind of, you know, foreign to a certain degree, like this concept of generative AI. Now it's becoming mainstream. But how did you even become aware of it?
Yeah, so I think it all started honestly with the NFTs becoming like a much more mainstream, field. And so, looking at that and looking at blockchain and looking at, what was going on there, which obviously that's been around for a lot longer than it's become,
Yeah.
a bigger deal in just everyday folks. So I think, seeing these algorithmic art generations, like there was art block, there was, bored apes, there was pudgy penguins. I mean, I could keep going on and on and on about all
Yeah.
these NFTs, but it was just mind blowing to me, like trying to comprehend how they were creating these pieces of art and how everything kind of had this similar look to it, across like thousands and thousands of images. And so coming from somebody who has an art background, who's, generating art by hand or through an iPad or Adobe or whatever it may be, I was like, I need to figure this out. I need to get into OpenSea. I need to start, minting some artworks. But of course, I couldn't keep up with that. And so, as things evolved over time, I really it was just amazing to me that, when Midjourney, I guess, came on the scene, which I believe was like in 2022-ish,
Yeah.
my husband actually was the one who pulled me aside and said, Meg, have you seen this? I was like, seen what? He's showing me these, what we now know as deep fakes, right? That like,
Hmm.
of Trump or Biden or the Pope. I'm like, what is this? Like, this is crazy. We were both like just blown away. Like, what is Midjourney? So seeing that and seeing what was going on and trying to comprehend all of that was just beyond. So I said, I've got to get in this. I've got to figure this out, right?
That's so cool.
So
So it was early days, and that's probably the NFT stuff. That's probably even like in 2021. So you're seeing this stuff being
yes,
created, and then Midjourney comes
yes,
out, and it almost passed like this stage because I remember when there was art coming out, and you would see it, and it like the iconic ones like Will Smith eating spaghetti, or like stuff like that, where it's kind of very odd looking, but you're like, okay, well that's cool. But then it crossed like this uncanny valley where now it's like, oh my God, this looks completely real, right?
I mean, well, we've come a long way even in 6 months with
Yeah,
technology.
it's
So I've
crazy.
been in this probably for like a year and a half. I jumped in, I was begrudgingly like going into Discord. Had no idea what I was getting
Hmm.
myself into, which I think a lot of people are intimidated by. But I can tell you right now, if you want to jump in, it's the best thing. I wish I did it sooner, to be honest.
Yeah.
I was fearful. I was like, I'm going into this world. I'm not a gamer. I have no idea. That's kind of the, I guess, what you think of when you look at Discord. So, but it had nothing to do with that. I've actually made a lot of great connections through the platform, and I think having the multi-use and having Midjourney in there has been really a cool function. So yeah, I mean, so now obviously we're moving over from Discord into Alpha. You obviously, in Midjourney, you need to have like at least 1,000 generations in
Hmm.
Midjourney, which is, a lot for some people who aren't in it all the time. For me, I don't even want to tell you how many I have. It's
We'll have
slightly
to get the number
embarrassing.
later. Yeah. And for those that don't know, Alpha is essentially the new platform that Midjourney's created, so you don't have to go through Discord to use it. But yeah, Discord's a really cool community. Midjourney was my first uh, path into Discord, even knowing what it was. But I've found a lot of really cool communities in the meantime as well. But there's been this shift over time where you look at like Photoshop back in the day, even like the camera coming out where people were kind of doomsday, oh, this is the end of art and creativity. And Photoshop, people being able to do things with Photoshop, same kind of thing, but then it just gets kind of ingrained into your way of doing things. And now we're hearing the same thing with Midjourney. What's your view there? Curious, like the impact on creativity. Do you see this being different than some of those transformations we saw in the past where you get these new tools?
I mean, I think it's very similar in what you're describing, going from, you know, hand drawn art to Adobe, for example, and just jumping in there.
Mhm.
However, I think it's just a bigger jump. Like, so for example, like as
Yeah.
an artist or any creative, you can literally think up an image and text into Midjourney what you want that
Mhm.
image to look like with very descriptive tokens, as they call it, which in our, in layman's terms, that's just words. So you're really just
Mhm.
putting words on paper, or in this prompt, and it comes back with an image that potentially you can now manipulate to really make it look like what your vision is. So, I mean, I would say, in parallel to like a Photoshop, like, in my industry, for example, I didn't even know. I didn't even know Photoshop or Illustrator going into the industry. I actually just learned it
Yeah.
all on my own. A lot of learning on the job, which I think a lot of people do. So I think, just seeing the transition of somebody who didn't really understand any platform and then going into something that's completely, text to prompt. I mean, I'm sorry, text to image. It's wild. It's like you can't really even describe, how vast, your imagination can be until you're in there. So I don't know. It's like, and then I've obviously seen the evolutions of Adobe, where in my industry, building screen print separations from scratch,
Mhm.
I'm going into channels and breaking it down and then creating films. Like, it's such a long process, but now Photoshop has what's called index, and you can literally just take your image and index into however many colors you want, and you can build your screen prints from there. So there's parallels, but it's still very different. I mean, I think in
Yeah.
terms of generating visual concepts and prototyping, that's where AI completely blows anything else out of the water in terms of designing.
Yeah. And
So
it's been the interesting thing for me. Like I used to like fancy myself an artist back in like grade school and I loved it and then just like lost track of it. But there's like this cool element of like your creativity coming back once you start playing around in it because the stuff in your head, you can turn it into something. So that's been a cool piece there. But you hit on it a little bit. Like it's starting to ingrain into your process, and I'm sure changing your process and approach to things as well. Like, for you, how has it changed your process? Where has it enhanced it or made it quicker or just like completely, blew it up in a sense? Like where have you seen the most changes happening in your creative
I
process?
Yeah, I mean, as an artist, just to get those visuals like
Yeah.
immediately. I mean, I'm coming from an art and English background, so the English part of, what I, obviously have studied has come into play significantly in this. I think if you're a communicator, you can really get those thoughts down on paper much easier. You can get the image quicker. So having that background is pretty beneficial, I think, in terms of, understanding the communication aspect. But I think it's creating prototypes just significantly
Mm.
faster. Even in, my professional life, generating textile patterns, graphics, even fabrics, and then like combining them and taking, you know, models and kind of merging those together and creating storytelling through mood boards has been significantly faster. You used to have to it could take like a full day to get, a concept, drawn out. So I think now with having tools like Midjourney, it just makes it so much more streamlined. You can integrate your colors, you can integrate a palette, and I think it's all going to even keep getting better, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think that, brands can now create like their trends and their color schemes and, just really report it much faster and get it in front of the powers that be faster, to get feedback and not have to like do it all from scratch and that type of thing. So I think, that's where it's really been a huge impact
So I'm hearing like
on
two areas. It's almost that front end piece of it, the concepting. So like you mentioned, that can go from like a day to hours or less probably,
ours.
where you can.
Yeah, absolutely.
Does it change that way in which you interact with whoever you're working with or presenting that with? And just because the acceleration has happened, does it change that approach to like, are you creating more prototypes and options, or is it just a quicker feedback loop and style there? Like, what have you kind of found in the process side of it?
No, that's an excellent way to describe it. Is that you can show more options. You can, get graphic and print ideas in front of whoever needs to see it sooner, and to get rather than building everything up front, it's like creating a roadmap essentially much faster,
Mm.
and you can really lay it out, and just get those variations and styles and that all approved much much faster.
And what about on
So
the actual like call it production ready, like the end of the thing? How much are you seeing it there versus, do you think it's just a matter of time before you have like the tooling to kind of edit stuff there? Or what do you see
yeah.
on the kind of the end of the process with the final product?
No, I mean, I think it's still not there yet.
Mhm.
I think, for example, in marketing, I think you could easily take the images and run with them.
Yeah.
You can, generate any sort of, mood board or storyline that's going to meet your brand guidelines, pretty fast. But when it comes to fashion, we're a little bit behind in that sense where, you really can't take, verbatim what you get from output from text to image. I think you really
Mhm.
still need to do a lot of manipulation, and you need to, redraw, rebuild, and also get, actual product on models is taking a little bit more time, to get those visuals out there for editorial sake. I think there's also some ethical things that we need to consider,
Yeah.
in terms of putting, product on models, and not it being, somebody who's actually doing that as their career. So I think there's definitely some gray areas that I think we need to work out, but we are getting closer. I really do believe that, it's going to be one of these things that I would say in the next 5 years, those product shots, those lifestyle images, generating print and pattern. It's really going to be about, who's art directing that, what their vision is.
Mhm.
I mean, you can't take away the human element. You really can't,
Yeah.
because, as somebody who's creative, you can tell what's good and what's not good, right? So
Yeah.
you're able to like really take that analysis and kind of, really, bring that to the forefront. And I guess that's something that I do want to emphasize, is that, you still need to have a creative eye and understand, color and style and all of those things.
And I think that's the core thing, back to the analogy we led the show with, right? The domain experts are going to be the people that excel the most using these tools. I think the, domain experts that are not, that's who will end up kind of falling behind in a sense. But you mentioned it, like we're using it today on the marketing front, a little bit easier versus to your point, kind of on the fashion side where, if something's not exactly like the thing you're selling potentially, then you could have issues there. So that's interesting, even within different domains and industries, there's varying levels of kind of acceleration and adoption, and then where you use it in the process, which is kind of fascinating as we go.
Absolutely. I mean, we're all designers, right? We're all designing, or
Yeah.
we're all, being these creative professionals, but at the same time, there are different levels of what's accepted, what's not accepted.
Hmm.
It's interesting. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see what happens over time, and what, you know, in terms of, protecting IP and all of those things that, a lot of these corporations want to make sure that they're, the following the right guidelines, and, making sure that everything is, status quo. So and unfortunately, fortunately and unfortunately, AI is moving so fast that, it could change, things could change monthly, daily, weekly.
Hmm.
So keeping up with that, it makes strategy really hard.
Yeah, that's true. And the IP side, that's like the copyright, that's a whole nother discussion because the toughest thing is they don't have any type of laws or regulations in place on either side, whether it's like you can use anything from the internet or you can't, and there has to be, trademark type things in place. So that will be really interesting to see what plays out there. But the last kind of question before we jump into actually playing around with some stuff, I'm curious, like, you kind of stumbled upon this product. What's your approach to learning within it? How are you progressing within the tool? Is it just what we're about to see in a minute, just playing around with it and starting to pick up on it? Like, what's your approach to actually becoming an expert in this Midjourney space?
I mean, I'm not going to lie. I love to just throw in random words and see what
Yeah.
comes out, which I think a lot of people like to do. I actually jumped into Rooms last week, which is a new feature that Midjourney is releasing. Right now, it's only for super users. So somebody like me who has more than 10K images, you can jump in there and you can kind of see the process of other people prompting live in real time. So
Oh,
I was
cool.
watch so yeah, so I was watching people prompt. Some people are just throwing in random words. Some people have a real structure. So that's interesting to see, just to kind of get an overview of how other people are using the tool. But for me, it does take some studying, because you really need to understand prompt structure, right? Like you need to start
Mm.
understanding, what, because I laugh, even like I look back at what I was prompting when I first jumped in here. It's just such a mess. I don't even know.
Yeah.
I think it was Midjourney 4. It could have even been earlier than that. I'm not sure, but you need to so for me, it's like I did obviously get the fundamentals. So you need to understand, that your subject comes first, and then the position of your structure, and, the setting, and the lighting, and all of these things that sort of come into play in terms of making sure that your image looks like what your vision is, right? And
Mm.
communicating that through a prompt. So, but now that I know those fundamentals, and I've kind of mastered all of that, now it's just about how do we push the tool. So, and I think that's where, this text to prompt stuff is moving. This is obviously my own point of view, but I don't think prompting is going to be as important down the line as people think it is. I think a lot of it's going to
Mm.
be, how do we manipulate these images? How do we craft something, right? Through, either taking a style or something that already exists and kind of making it your own. And I think that's what's really exciting about Midjourney, is that they really the tool allows you to do that. So, when I'm prompting, sometimes it's really organic, and it's just to totally mess around, and you'll see where my head is sometimes, and it's just all over the place. But
Yeah.
it's exciting as a creative, because I think, and in general, I've always kind of tackled, being an artist in that way, as I always think about technique, like at probably the beginning of every stage of what I create. So technique is
Mm.
like my number one thing. So when I'm jumping in there, I'm thinking about, okay, what's the output of technique that I want? And so it's just really cool to have something that's going to visualize that for you really quicker, or much quicker. So
How do you
yeah, so
define
I think
technique? When you say technique, I'm just
Yeah, so
curious.
tech, yeah, I guess that can be interpreted in so many ways. I'm looking at, what's the fabric texture? What's the,
Mm,
what is the paint texture? What does the, just different textures and things like that, I think is really important. And I think,
yeah.
obviously in my industry as a professional, I'm looking at those things from a graphic designer standpoint always. So I think it's just natural that it kind of flows into, text to prompt for me.
And that's the
So
nuance
that's,
where the experts are going to do great at this because you're already thinking in like ways and approaches from your past experience, and you're just applying it to this new tool. So I think that's the interesting part. And you mentioned on prompting, I totally agree with you. I think the whole concept of like prompt engineering is just going to be, it's going to be like, do you know how to use Microsoft Excel and PowerPoint? It's just like, yeah,
exactly.
well, you
Yes.
want a job, you're going to need to know how to do this stuff in the future, is I think how it's going to evolve into.
Yeah, no, I think
So,
so. That's why I've been doing a lot of manipulating. And I think that's
mhm,
where, I'm trying to push the tool further than what people wouldn't expect to do with it. I've always done that,
yeah,
even in Photoshop, Adobe, all those programs. So I think that's very similar.
yeah. Well, with that, let's jump into it. Let's get into Midjourney and start to kind of go into how you approach things. I'm sure there's some cool like techniques and things as well uh, that you'll be able to show off as we get into it.
So right now, obviously, I'm in the Midjourney site, so it's a little bit different of a platform than Discord is. I actually really fell in love with prompting in Discord, but now that
Mhm.
I've really been in the website version, I kind of started to rethink it and use this more often.
It's a
Obviously,
little more
it's
user
not
friendly, probably,
it
right?
is a little
Than
bit more user friendly. So I think, when you're starting out, I think if you can jump in on the website, which I mean, you still need 1,000 images, but eventually, I think that's going to probably I think when they release either 6.1 or 7, I think more people will be able to jump into the web. But, anyway, so I was thinking today, since robots are a hot topic and,
yeah,
our
everything with the
humanoid
humanoids.
robots,
Yeah, that's right.
that we could kind of design our own robot. I mean, for me, I kind of would prefer to do a fembot. That's just, because coming from a
Yeah.
fashion background and making them look
Yeah.
pretty designer and, a little bit feminine is the way I'd go. So I did start to actually generate. You can kind of see here, I have generated some bots. They are all, these sort of ceramic glossy, metallic, and white gold touches in them. And they feel like very futuristic. So,
And just for
uh,
reference, so I see there's four kind of portraits or pictures across each row. Yeah, I'm assuming is each row a separate prompt? I actually haven't gotten into the Midjourney
oh, you
site. Is
haven't
that the
got,
prompt
okay.
over to the right?
Yeah. So actually, the
Okay,
prompt
cool.
is up at the top.
That's
The prompt is at the bar at the top.
uh,
And then
okay.
to the right, it's actually giving you the 4 images that you generate in Midjourney, but it's just giving
Yeah.
you it in that format.
Mhm.
So it kind of gives you this like a little bit more, it's easier to read, honestly, and then you can kind of
Yeah.
see more of your images in this view. You can actually go, so right now I'm in the create view. I can also
Yeah.
click on this little portrait tab or picture tab, and basically it brings me to, just a view of things in a different way, which are archived. So you can even you can
Mm.
create folders in here, you can create filters in here of like what you actually want to see from your archives.
Yep.
So yeah, it's cool in that sense where you can actually look at the full picture. But right now I'll go back to the create view and you can kind of see what happens here. Uh, so when you're writing a prompt, and for example, this is just one that I've already kind of pre-prompted for you, so you can, kind of we can walk through it.
Mhm.
Basically, I'm starting out with a female robot, which is essentially the subject matter that I want to highlight. So when you're in prompting, you take what's called a token and you want to make sure that the order of your tokens are how you want it to actually output. So here I
Mm.
have a female robot, which is, and then I have highly detailed portraiture, which I think that's really important to keep at the forefront of your prompt, because you really want to make sure that you are highlighting the style of what your images could look like. So if I wanted it to be a painting, I could change it to painting or watercolor or whatever it may be. And then I added another section here with, it says in the style of cyberpunk. So here, cyberpunk, I guess, is utilized a lot when you kind of want to get these futuristic sci-fi
Hmm.
images. And so that's kind of why I'm using that here, just to kind of get a little bit more extra, robot in here, or robot aesthetic. And then I'm also going to touch upon what I want the robot to be wearing. So here, the robot is wearing a glossy ceramic bodysuit. So that'll give you kind of this like really sleek looking essence. And then I go into what colors I want it to be. So in this case, I want it to be white and rose gold accents, and which will basically make the robot appear, much like kind of, a little bit more sleek with like these metallic touches, kind of give it like a nice effect. And then I'll go in and say what kind of camera I want. I don't always do this, but
Hmm.
for this reason, I'm giving you like an actual camera, which is the Hasselblad X1D. So I've done a lot of studying about this and try to figure out like what is going to give me the most 3D highly detailed effect. And so this is just one camera style that I use a lot. I also use Leica a lot. Those are two really popular ones, especially in the fashion world. Not a photographer, but if you do your homework, you can start to look into, what these styles are, and it's easily available anywhere. You can look on the web, or it's very easy to find. And then
And that's the cool
I
part
want.
too, like the fact that, and some people may not know this, that you can go to that level of depth and detail, even to like the type of camera you're using for the shot, which is pretty insane that the prompt can consider that in the output, right?
It's amazing. You can go so as far as, now you can even pick the lens type. You can pick, the aperture that you want. Like it's
Wow.
really
Yeah.
wild. Sometimes, I mean, I don't, to be honest, now that I'm kind of playing more with, the further features in like the newer features in
Hmm.
Midjourney, I'm not using it as much, and I can explain that later. But I
Okay.
think just to kind of give the overview of what, my process is important. So then we go into, I want it. So I've focused on my subject now, right? And I focused on the
Mm.
quality of the image that I want. But now I'm going in and I'm thinking, okay, well, so where is this robot? Like, where is she standing? What is she doing? So in this case, I don't really want anything in the background. Like I want it to be solid. So so my next part of the prompt is solid white background. And then I also added a step further and I put isolated, because I don't want her with any other robots. I don't want like anything else in the
Mm.
image except for the one isolated robot.
Yeah. Yeah.
So because if you don't put isolated, you could potentially get other fluff behind it, or they'll, Midjourney will get creative and start adding other things. And then my last part of the prompt is 100 millimeter. I find that 100 millimeter lens works really, really well for portraiture. So if I really want to get those crisp lines, the really fine detail, that's really going to give me what I want. So, and then you also need to think about the structure as a whole, which then with Midjourney, there are what's called parameters. So when you go
Mm.
into that section of the world, it's more of something that you kind of have to study a little bit
Yeah.
and understand what parameters are. But, one being chaos, which is to start, some of these parameters make me laugh because like, what's chaos? Uh, my life is chaos. No, but basically
It's like a
chaos
whole new
is
dictionary of stuff you got to start learning with these parameters, right?
Yeah. So chaos basically is going to interpret your 4 image output, and it's going to give you maybe a little bit more variety in the output that you get. So if you add chaos, you'll get maybe different
Okay.
positions or different like angles or different, details that vary from one image to the next in your
So
little
within
the
within the
four.
four of the output. Oh, I didn't. All right, this is like really cool because this is like a master class. I'm learning. I'm like listening intently here. I didn't realize you could do that because a lot of times you will get the four images and they are very similar. So this parameter kind of allows you to get a bit of variation within that initial output, essentially.
Correct. And I think also stylization does that, or the stylize feature also
Yeah.
does that a little bit. And I can go into that next. But so I also have aspect ratio, which so my
Yep.
aspect ratio here is 2 to 3, because I want to basically get, so 2 is my width and 3 is my height. So basically what I want to do is make sure that I'm getting like a little bit more robot than if I were to just put in like 1 to 1. I'm not getting a square image.
Hmm.
I'm getting something that's a little bit more rectangular. So I can really pull in, different arm details or whatever it may be. So that's why I put that aspect ratio in there. And honestly, sometimes I think that matters in terms of the output and what you get and the format that you get. So, always consider aspect ratio when you are prompting. The next thing is, so again, we talked about stylize. So you go in here, you can add a stylize value to your images. So here I'm putting 300. I use 300 a lot. I don't know, it just seems to work. It's just, I find that it's so stylized. What it does is it kind of adds like a little bit of an artistic element to your images. So obviously, if you don't want to, if you're looking for something a little bit more like everyday picture, I don't know if I would add as much. It really depends on what your use case is and what you're trying to accomplish. But here I do really like stylized 300. It's just a preference. Everybody has a preference, whatever you want to do.
What's the scale on the stylized from? Is it 0 to
Um,
some
yeah,
number,
sorry. Yeah,
1,000 or
it's
so?
zero. Yeah, 0 to 1,000. So, and
Okay.
even with chaos is 0 to 100. So that's another thing that you kind of need to study, is to understand like what these parameter values are and what,
Yeah.
the minimum and the maximum are. It's because it's different for everything. So
And
yeah,
this
in
gets
this
back to like
case,
there's no perfect prompts. I think what's great here is you're detailing a structure to approach it with, and even the order within the structure I didn't realize was as important. But then start playing around with it. I think that's where you start to fine tune with your own personal preferences in a sense, right?
yeah, I think you have to play. That's the only way that you're going to learn
Hmm.
in this tool. I think, for me, like my my little slogan is, AI should be fun. It shouldn't be so
Oh, I like
serious. You
that.
really
Yeah.
can't take yourself too seriously. I think you need to
Yeah.
be in here and figuring out what works best for you, because there is no right or wrong, honestly. And I don't think there's any expert per se, because you are the expert for your own exploration.
Yeah.
So I think that's really important to kind of highlight here. And obviously,
I
things are evolving every day. Like Midjourney
yeah.
changes every week or every month. So it's just relearning and repracticing and practice, practice, practice.
I think too, like a lot of people that I've talked to feel like they're already too far behind. But if you look in the step back, the grand scheme of things, like you've never been closer to a starting line of a major disruption than you are right now. So I think that's a big mindset shift too. Like you even mentioned it, like you said, I wish I would have started earlier. And there's people now that probably feel even more so that way, but we're still so early, I think, in this journey to where don't let that be the thing that holds you back for the audience and the people listening. If this is new to you and you're like, oh my God, she's so good at this, there's no way I'm going to catch up. Don't let that stop you. Get into the tools, start playing around with them. And that's not just Midjourney. I mean, that's any generative AI tool that seems like there's, 100 coming out every single day. But
Yeah, I still feel like I haven't scratched the surface, to be
yeah,
honest. I love Midjourney for so many reasons, but I think, if your headspace is in it to learn and develop and come
yeah,
up with processes that you never thought you could ever do, and finding solutions to things by utilizing AI, that's the goal. It doesn't matter when you start, or where, you started a year ago, you started 2 years ago, whatever it may be. Like things are, like you said, always evolving. And I think that, you know, any good time is a good time.
yeah.
And you don't have to be creative either. I don't think you necessarily have to be creative. I think you just have to be really good, like a really good communicator. That's, and
Mm,
I think you can. And I think even through, developing, my prompts through AI, it's actually made me a better communicator, honestly, because I'm really starting to really dive in and think about what I want and why, what my end use case is, where before it was kind of just, pulling things together and trying to get things done. But now AI gives me more time to really be creative and pull those concepts together.
Yeah.
And so it's like almost cut that creative time in half, where you're not pressured as much to get so much output, because you're basically like you're leveling the playing field a little bit.
Hmm. Oh yeah.
Okay, back to the fun part.
Yeah.
So
Let's keep it
basically,
going. Yep.
so okay, so now so if you go in, there's actually like a little slider bar. So people who are new to Midjourney could definitely like take advantage of this slider bar.
Hmm.
I didn't go through that at first because I wanted to show you the actual prompt structure. But here, if I click on the little slider bar, it gives me an image size option. It gives me a model option. It gives me a version option, aesthetics. So aesthetics being stylization, weirdness, variety. I did not touch on weirdness yet, but weirdness is a thing in Midjourney. So if you
It
want
sounds like fun.
something, it is fun. But I can go back to that. But basically, and then you go into, more options, which is, your speed and your mode that you're in, whether it's stealth or, you're
Hmm.
on a different plan. But basically, so currently I'm just kind of showing you this. I prefer, just because I know the tool so well, that I'm able to just put in what my favorite parameters are. But this kind of brings up like a little bit more of a parameter guideline for you, and you can kind of use some sliders to get you there a little bit faster.
Like low code versus actually doing the coding, I guess,
Yeah,
for
exactly.
engineers
Yeah,
on the listening today.
exactly. Yep, yep. Great parallel. So, all right, so what I'm going to do is so now we have our prompt. I am going to hit enter, and now we are going to process this generation. So luckily I'm in fast mode and this won't go too slow. um, Basically, so now it's completing the process. So right now
In
we're
you
at,
mentioned the fast mode, so there's different. And is this based on your plan, how much you're paying, or is it often you use the tool? How do they define that?
yeah, yeah, so they define it by your plan. So
Yeah.
basically you get a certain amount of hours in what's called fast mode to
Hmm.
utilize. So depending on your plan, it could be like, you know, 15, it can 15 hours, it could be 30 hours. It depends on like what your choice in how much you use the tool
Yeah.
is sort of like what you want to pick. Relax mode actually, so relax mode is the other option, which is pretty fast. To be honest, sometimes I have blown through my fast hours just because, I was totally down some crazy rabbit hole,
Yeah.
and my fast hours were just generating, and then I go back and do another project. And the way that I prompt, I think I probably burn through so many so fast, and I can show you why that is in a second. But relax mode is pretty fast, and it's obviously another option. It just doesn't get you the final result as quick as fast does. So that's the difference. Okay, so we have our four generation outputs. So you can kind of see here, you have, so I can click on each one. Like here, this is pretty
Look at
true
the
to what we
detail.
asked
It's
for. The
crazy.
detail is crazy.
Yeah.
That's obviously due to the camera and obviously the lens that I chose. So you're really getting like these glossy, smooth effects, like a lot of like, I didn't even put lighting in here because I was kind of, leaning towards more of like the lens and the camera doing that for me essentially, which lighting is a
Hmm.
whole other piece of this that I think a lot of people sort of overlook in Midjourney. Lighting is like a really good, really important feature in terms of getting, the look that you want in certain images. Like if you want a backlight, or you want, some light painting, or you want to do a colored light, like there's just so many things you can do with lighting to give you like this mood of your image. But again, like even this one, for example, I didn't put in any sort of lighting, but it's giving me this crazy neon
Yeah.
glow throughout the body, which is amazing. I mean, that's not
Mhm.
something I asked for, but through the stylize tool, that's probably where that's coming from.
That's what I've
Or
noticed too.
parameter. I'm sorry, parameter. Yeah.
Yeah. But when I'm playing around with Midjourney, the output may be something I hadn't initially intended, but that'll trigger other ideas, which it just gets back to I think it's the speed of being able to play around with the tool is critical. Like if you try to do this without these tools, I mean, especially the photorealistic, it's a whole different process in terms of the creativity element, but it like triggers other ideas. That's the neat thing I've noticed playing around with it, which will then, to your point, send you down these rabbit holes where you wonder
Yeah.
how you got to where you started.
I mean, the tool is being trained on so many different images that are being generated,
Hmm.
right? So I think a lot of the times, if people are generating something really common, I see this actually a lot on Instagram. I post on
Yeah,
Instagram a lot, and I do see that sometimes trends start forming, and you're like, how did that happen? Like, why are eyeballs so important today? Like, why is that such a theme? But I think what's
really.
happening
Wow.
is that Midjourney is then taking the
Mm.
stylization and kind of like just sneaking it in there because it's just a part of the algorithm, right? And when
Yeah,
people are generating the same thing or similar things, it starts to just sort of transform across the whole entire platform.
yeah.
So those are
Huh.
little sneaky things that I see happen a lot. um, where I was like, wait, I did that last week probably for an hour and now somebody's got it up on their Instagram. So it's not that anything's original per se. I mean, everybody's, looking at each other's stuff, and whether it's
Hmm.
intuitive or not intuitive, people are taking, ideas from everywhere. I mean, but that's just the way that the creative world works. We're always,
Yeah, that's true.
either or copying or whether it's intentionally or unintentionally. So I think that that's kind of a weird thing about the tool is that it's doing it, but it's not always something that you're expecting.
Hmm.
Uh, so, okay, so we have our four robots. So what I can even do here is so if you, so I really love this one with this neon glow. It's really cool. It has like something about it is really nice. So, you can even go in here, you can vary it. So I can click on this little tab. I'll hover over the image. I'll click on this tab that says like very strong or very subtle. So I can kind of click in here and do either or I can even, oh, sorry, I can, let me go back. I can right click on this image, and basically now I can even go in and like change it just by right clicking. So
Mm.
I can use the image as my source for another image, which is basically taking the style of the image. So then we get into these crazy other features that were just released in the past month. So there's style reference, there's character reference. Basically, what those are taking basically a base image and using that for other images that you're generating. So in this case, I actually did want to show you something that I kind of stumbled upon, which is basically utilizing character reference, which is essentially taking, your face or someone's face and putting it, um, you know, within several images. Like you're able to basically
Yeah.
transpose the same human across multiple images, which is incredible.
And that's
But
an important piece too, because that was a problem, maybe not a problem, but just made things like Make Journey tough. Because if you want to keep a character consistent, think of, um, a movie, a show, or just like some type of campaign or whatever it may be. If it's not the same character, it's like tough to progress the tool. But that's this new feature, like you mentioned, when it came out a few weeks ago, maybe
yeah,
a month or so ago at this point. But that's a big step into making this something you can use uh, past it just being kind of like a fun toy to play with, right?
yeah, you can use it commercially essentially, but that's a
Exactly.
whole other
Yeah.
a whole other ballgame like we talked about before. But yeah, it's amazing. But what I'm finding is that because I know the tool so well, I'm starting to try to take some of these features and use them in unusual ways. So this is a way that
Yeah.
I think that would be interesting to the viewers, even though it's unusual, just to kind of show you that it's not always about looking at the surface of what features are released. It's really going into the actual depth of what these tools
Mm.
could potentially do. So in this case, I actually just want, so I'm going to morph. Basically, I'm going to take like a nice, beautiful print and pattern, but I'm going to morph it onto the robot body.
Oh,
So
that's cool.
she
Okay.
will know. So this robot, this beautiful robot that we have here, will no longer be white. She will be integrated with the pattern that I'm generating.
Okay.
So basically, what it's going to do is that we'll type in essentially a pattern that we want. So I'm going to show you. Basically, I'm going to say watercolor floral. And then I'm going to say in the style of Japanese cherry blossoms. Then I'm going to also add color. So we'll do pink and maybe, and then we'll add it to, and we'll make sure we add a background because we want to make sure that like, so the visual that I'm foreseeing is that I want this beautiful watercolor that's, you know, like on a white background. I don't really want like anything else in that. And then what you can even do is you can add a parameter to this. So you can actually add tile, which is something that you could use in real life for other things, is that once you, if you add dash dash tile to your prompt, you can actually get an image that actually will repeat on all sides, which is really cool. So I'm going to output this watercolor.
And so the prompt you just put there, it knows to relate it to that second image that
Not yet.
Okay, not yet. Okay, so you're creating the
Not
pattern,
yet.
and
I'm
I
creating the
got you. Okay,
pattern now.
this is a step in the
So
process.
technically, yeah. So actually, this is a two-step process. So basically, now what I'm doing, so I have the robot that I really like. Now I need to create the pattern. So what I'm going to do is now I'm going to use this pattern as my character, which is really unusual. Wouldn't think of it.
Yeah.
So now I'm going to take the pattern, and essentially, it's going to sort of blend, and you'll see kind of the magic that happens. It's really cool. So now what I'm going to do, so these are all really beautiful patterns. I don't know which one to choose, to be honest. If you'd like to pick one, go
Yeah, I
for
kind of
it.
like that the first one. Let's do that one.
The
It's got
first
a little
one?
more
Okay. All right. Okay.
nuance to
All
it.
right. So yeah, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the pattern, and then I'm going to basically, so I clicked on the pattern. Now I'm going to go all the way to the bottom of my screen, and you're going to see a use feature. Now I'm going to click on image. And so now that what that does is that brings it into my prompt window. So now I have this in my window, and so you can kind of see it up here. There's a little icon. It's showing that that's the image that I'm using for this prompt. And then I'm also going to take my robot that we chose, which is the second one. And I'm also going to select her and move her to my window. But I'm also going to take the prompt because I need a prompt to sort of work in here. So I'm also going to select use and then click on prompt. And so now here I have
the prompt from earlier that you used to, okay.
Correct. The same prompt that I used to create the first robot that we're choosing. And so now I'm going to go in here. I'm going to click. So because I want my pattern to act as my character essentially, and that's going to cross over into what the final image looks like and how it stays consistent across the image, I'm going to click on this little little icon here. It kind of looks like a little human. And it's basically the character reference, or the what we're calling a dash dash C ref of that image. And so I've had that selected. I have my other image of my robot. And now I can even add what's called character weight to this, which is a lot of experimentation to really try to figure out what works, best for what your end use is. So in this case, I'm going to add dash dash CW, which is the value that will apply to this image. So, or to the CREF. And basically, so now I go in here, I try to think about, okay, so for character weight, you can go anywhere from 0 to 100. So I'm going to pick something kind of in the middle-ish. So I'll probably pick or maybe towards the end, I'll do 75, for example. So now
that's the character weight for the pattern.
For the pattern.
Is that right? So,
yeah.
And that's basically just defining how strong the pattern should stay consistent or overweight into the image, or how would you define the weight?
Yeah, it's basically the value that you're applying to your new generation. So, right, exactly. Essentially, how much you want that to impact your next generation. So 75, I find, is pretty good for my use case. Some people, for example, if you're using it with a human, you maybe, so if you go really, really high, so if you go to 100, or if you go to CW 100, it will take over the hair, it will take over the face structure, it will take over basically everything about the previous image. But if you do a low weight, it's going to not take as much over. It might just take like the facial features, for example.
Yeah.
So that's like in the intended use of this feature, you would kind of use it that way. So I'm going to generate. So now I clicked enter. So I have my CREF, I have my character weight value, and I have my robot, and I have my prompt from the previous robot that we're trying to essentially create, but in a different way. So this output is generating. Yeah, you have to wait. The anticipation.
Yeah, I know. I'm excited to see this. And what's cool too, it's what's neat about this the alpha platform is you can use just, buttons to do the certain things. When I was playing around with character reference, you had to actually figure out that it was, to your point, dash dash, what is it, CREF, and then figure out how to put it
Yes.
into the prompt. And if you have like one bit of syntax off, it kind of messes it up, right?
Yeah. So you actually need to include the URL. So you do dash dash CREF, then you include
Yeah.
your URL, and then you get and then and then after that you can put in your parameters, and then you can also put in your character weight or your dash dash CW.
Oh, look at this
So
output. This is interesting how it interpreted it.
so yeah, so I can scroll through, I can kind of show you each one. So basically, this is interpreting the print and kind of
Yeah.
essentially putting it on the robot, which I think is just so cool. The fact that it's taking, the essence of the pattern and
Yeah.
just like morphing it onto the body of the robot. It's wild. So instead of complicating a prompt and saying, I want to write, a white robot with,
Hmm.
flowers and like a really, really long prompt, now you can kind of fine tune that and do it a little bit faster with, say, for example, if you have an aesthetic or a color palette that you need to integrate,
Hmm.
this is another great way of doing that. So if you want to get, a color palette faster based on an image that already exists, you can kind of morph them together. I can even show you now, this is another thing that I use a lot. So for example, I'm going to pick this robot. I think she looks pretty cool. She's got these like
Hmm.
navy details that are picked up in here, almost like a leather effect. And then I'm going to go into Remix, and so Remix is my favorite Midjourney feature of all time. So this allows you to take your current prompt and manipulate
Hmm.
it. You could do anything with it. So I can even go in here, I can say remix and then do strong, select
Hmm.
strong here. And it brings back everything that I had from before. It's just now I can go in and I can even edit. Like I can edit in here. I can say like, instead, maybe I want a male robot. Maybe I
Yeah.
want, extra details in the robot. But here, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, now I can say, I don't know, female robot, and then I could say wearing a glossy ceramic bodysuit, but I can add like tentacles or something crazy. So, which I love
Oh, there you
doing
go. The alien
tentacles.
is taking
Tentacles are
over.
fun. So I can add octopus tentacles. And then I can even go further and add in some token weights, which is a whole other rabbit hole that you can go into,
Hmm.
which token weights are basically 1 to 5 is basically putting now an emphasis on your prompt, like within your prompt structure of things that you really want to highlight. So,
Yeah.
but I won't go there yet. And then what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to remove my pattern. I'm going to remove the previous robot because I don't need any of that anymore. I just want to
Yeah.
see how this takes over by editing my prompt through Remix. So now I hit enter. Oh, I still had CW in there. See, mistakes happen. It's totally fine. Strong. So then I'm gonna do what I did there. So I have to
So
get
did
rid
it did
of
it throw back an error there because of the
a throwback an error because I forgot to get rid of my character
mm,
weight value, which is important because if there is no image that you've selected as your character reference,
the
it's going to be
character?
like,
It
no,
doesn't know what to do.
I can't do this.
Yeah.
So now we hit enter, and so now it will generate. So now it's going back. Um, yes, and it says creation failed, and it makes you feel like you did something really wrong, but it's totally fine. It's totally part of the process. I've been
Yeah.
in Midjourney for how long, and I still do these things.
Does it let you
So
know
sometimes
what failed in the the prompt? Does it give you any kind of
Yeah, so
clues? Or does?
so I'm
It does, yeah.
highlighting on it right now. Can you see that? It says cannot
Yeah.
use dash dash CW without a CREF indication, basically. So I didn't
Oh,
have
cool.
any CREF indicated. So now it's totally confused. And it's why did you do that?
Yeah.
um, so now it's generating.
Did our octopus tentacles carry over into this prompt? I didn't see
So
any of
they
this.
didn't, yeah. So it got it's not as much as I would like. I mean, so this is where I kind of wanted to touch upon the next step in Remix. That
Hmm.
what I find is that Remix doesn't always register your first go around. Sometimes you
Yeah.
have to rerun it, which is something that Midjourney it has actually been pretty transparent about. So sometimes you'll have to either remix it again, but like, so for example, it started to sort of connect some of these like tentacle like images within this one in particular. The first one, you kind of
Hmm.
get this little bit of like hairline
Was it even in the prompt
tentacle-ish
though
thing.
when you pasted over the prompt?
Um, oh man. See?
That's what it was. Okay.
But it's funny though, it did register that. So I don't know if that's
Yeah.
something that, we can, yeah, so here we go. So let's do that again. But that is actually like a really true thing that does happen in Remix where
Hmm.
you don't always get here, I'm gonna go back and let's see, let's click on this guy. Let's remix this guy. Octopus tentacles. Okay, perfect. And then
I guess the answer to that is just keep trying, right? Just keep playing around with it until you get something you like.
I mean, honestly, that's how like really like when you get these happy mistakes, I think that's
Hmm.
kind of a cool thing because then you start to
Yeah.
find new ways of using the tool and new ways to experimenting with the tool. And I think that's kind of half the battle in this platform. So yeah, so now we're
Now we
getting
got some stuff. Yeah, there you go.
yeah, we got some amazing stuff. So now you can kind of see just by adding, just a few different words to the prompt, you're getting this output of, some tentacles, or you're getting like, such crazy stuff, which you wouldn't even have expected from, what the original output was. Yeah, so I'm just scrolling through here and like so you're kind of seeing it in the design a little bit more. So, but I could even rerun this again and you'll probably see more of it because in Remix, when you do rerun things, it tends to actually accelerate as you go through the
So
remix
are
a
you
couple times.
remixing for this one
This
that's running now? Are you remixing the remix one effectively?
Correct. I'm
Gotcha. Okay.
rerunning. So basically, I go down here, I go to my 4 outputs that I just
Hmm.
remixed. And now if I click on the rerun button down here,
Yeah.
basically now it's going to rerun that again. And I think what's going to happen is that we will see a little bit more tentacles this time around, which we do.
Yeah. There. Yep.
So now I can scroll through those when it's complete. So yeah, it's
Yeah,
cool.
that one's cool.
It's really cool. Yeah. And then I can even, I could go much further in this, but just to show you that this is, what this tool can do. And um, it's pretty wild.
Yeah, this is neat. And there's some other things too, like in painting and stuff like that. Is that still in, I'm assuming that's an alpha where you can kind of select an area and then adjust the prompt to tweak, whether it's like the helmet or, the body or something like that as well, right?
Yeah. So in all transparency, I think in painting is not perfect at what it does, right?
Yeah.
I think that they have a lot of work to do on it. So for me, I prefer actually to take it into Adobe Photoshop and use Gen Fill. Um, so
Oh, cool.
obviously I'm
Okay.
using another platform, but that's sort of my preference. So I actually do a lot of that. So I think that goes to show you that it's really important to integrate multiple platforms into your process and not just use one tool because then you're kind of limiting
Yeah.
yourself. So I do use Adobe a lot. Gen Fill is one of my favorite features in Photoshop. Like you can take things in and you can add like all sorts of crazy stuff. But I think, so for example, if I click on vary region in Midjourney, that brings up your in painting. So
Hmm.
for example, if I wanted to change something here, like I honestly, sometimes I don't know if it's going to do it or not. But if you select your little lasso tool, you go in here, you can kind of, like for example, if I wanted to select this part of the
Yeah.
helmet, like a little circular part of the helmet, I could go in here and say like, I could type in octopus tentacles, see if anything comes out. So let's check it out. So now I put octopus tentacles in the prompt window. I
And
hit
it's
the
just varying that
arrow.
one piece there.
It's going to vary
So
that one selection.
I think the big point you mentioned there is starting to integrate different tools in your process. Like you may take an image and take it to something at Adobe and play around with it there and take it further. So it's working it into your process in essence.
Yeah, I mean, I find that that's the only way to to get what I need. So I
Yeah.
think that that's something that people don't realize. They think, oh, Midjourney is going to give me everything I need immediately, right? I
Hmm.
think that if people have a lot of false hope in that, I think there's still a lot of editing involved that you need to do to really like brush and clean up what you've created in
Yeah.
Midjourney or any other, text to image platform. So I always try to preface that, you can't always rely on just one tool.
Hmm.
So yeah,
Yeah.
like,
It,
so these are, yeah.
yeah.
Go
So
ahead.
like to your point though, it didn't quite get the tentacle nature within the part you focused on, right? So it's kind of like
No,
an example
no.
of
So
there
you're
maybe
kind
a
of
little
seeing
bit.
this here. Yeah, a little bit,
Yeah.
right? You got a little
Yeah.
coils in there. Like this one's like not too bad. You get a little bit of like this coil situation.
Almost like a shell or
Um,
something.
yeah, right. I mean, it's just random. So I think the very region definitely needs some work, but what's amazing about that is I've been able to figure out another alternative that works, and that is, bringing it into Adobe, which, not everyone has that option, but it is just about the way that you're thinking about, other alternatives to the one tool
Hmm.
that is provided, because they all have their glitches. They all have, the things that we like, the things that we don't like, in any
Yeah.
platform, but it's just about integrating as many as you can to get, the final result that you need.
No, this has been awesome. Even
So,
like Adobe Premiere Pro, I saw the other day, they've started to integrate some AI stuff. And I don't know if you saw that video, but
oh,
that's
I'm
where it'll
blown
be cool to
away.
see. Yeah. You can kind of in the video, you could say, hey, remove this from the background or add this or change this, Rolex to something that's not a branded watch. Or it was really cool type of stuff they're doing there. But no, this has been
And
awesome, Meg. Any other tips or tricks you want to show off before we wrap it up here?
I mean, I could go on for another hour, to be honest, but I won't.
Yeah.
I won't do that to you. So hopefully, I mean, hopefully, I think even the fact that I made a mistake at one point is kind of, it's more leverage to say it's
Yeah.
okay. Like this is
Yeah.
something that, is happening organically in real time. You can always go back. You can always adjust. You can always, take, you know, um, what and apply it to any platform, but not to be fearful of
Mhm.
it, because you're really going to come up with, such amazing, you know, works for whatever your needs are at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So
And the last thing I would end on too is just a lot of people look at some of these new tools and like, oh, it's just a cool toy, but it really is accelerating the process depending on the domain, which was interesting, whether it was fashion or in marketing or in some type of graphic design. The level you take it and where you insert it into the process will be different. But I think too, it's allowing non-creatives or people without that deep expertise to start using some of this stuff, which is really interesting and cool. But Meg, where can people? What's the best spot to find you to reach out to you if they want to get some help with Midjourney? Which Meg's awesome at that. I'm sure she would love to connect with some folks that are looking to go deeper in this area.
yeah, so you can find me on LinkedIn. I am there quite a bit, learning from some of the best, obviously, and you can find me there. You can DM me. I'm also on Instagram, so both of those are the extension Meg Ball Creates.
That's awesome. Well, I appreciate you being on today, Meg, and thanks for taking us through a live Midjourney session. That was the first for Built Right, so I appreciate that.
No, it was so much fun. I mean, I wish we could do it more. It was so cool, so cool.
We'll have to set up a round two once some new features launch.
Sounds great. All right,
Thanks, Meg.
thank you.
Thanks for listening to Built Right. If you enjoyed the show, give us a follow or subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. And don't forget to leave us a review. For more info on Built Right, visit us at hatchworksbuiltright.com. As Gen AI reshapes industries, understanding and leveraging its capabilities is no longer an option, it's a necessity. And that's exactly why at Hatchworks, we developed our Gen AI Innovation Workshop. In this workshop, we immerse you into a full day of learning, hands-on ideation, and building. We hit foundational concepts and show you how they relate to your domain. Then we develop actual use cases for your business and your industry. And we even build a custom GPT based on the use cases we define. Check out the link in the show notes or visit hatchworks.com to get started today.